I think that most people have it in their power to little bit change the way they think, and to, when things are not so rosy, you look at the bright side of things. But I've been lucky, it hasn't been difficult. Ah,
Here you go.
thank you.
We're rolling on the camera. If
Yes.
I ask a question that you want to skip,
Yes.
that's fine.
I'm pretty resilient, I think, that I probably will be able to cope with everything.
Great.
I hope. My name is Hilda Cohen. I am 94, just last November. I now live in London, in Golders Green. I lived since I got married, which was in 1951, in Cardiff, which is the capital of the Principality of Wales. And before that, I lived in a little place called Merthyr Tydfil from 1939 until I got married and moved to Cardiff. And before that, until the age of 10, I grew up in Frankfurt am Main in Germany. There is a saying that give me a child to the age of 7, the Jesuits say it, and I can show you the man. I think those times are very, very powerful. I was the youngest of 3 children, and probably quite spoilt at the time. I was never built up as, oh, she's the Kleine, that's the little one in German. But I was never made a tremendous fuss of, but I was the youngest of 3, and therefore you feel a little bit special. I remember sitting on my father's lap when we have, the Jewish festivals, at the head of the table, and this was quite a badge of honor. I remember the street, I remember the name, I remember the house. I think it must have been my grandparents' house, and at one stage they made it into flats. We lived near a mountain range called the Taunus, and we used to have picnics and outings. We used to go there on a Sunday when there wasn't any school. I don't think I was particularly bright in school. I have very, very little memory of that. I remember the Jewish life. We had a stove in the living room, which was very odd, and it was on regular street, Mauerweg, which has now changed actually, because one of the son-in-law, has been there on business and took pictures, and it's quite different. But it was very much a Jewish area, and I've met people in Israel whose parents lived near there, around there. So the Jews congregated. I don't know why, maybe we didn't have a large enough oven. We and other friends that we knew used to make the bread for the Sabbath, the challah, and take it to the local baker and get it and bake it there. So I don't know why that was, because the home appeared to be quite well equipped, but I have a vivid memory of that Friday morning picking up the challah from the baker, or somebody picking up the challah from the baker. My brother, who's 3 years older than me, had made out of cardboard the Holy Ark and things. Ah, thank you. What have we got here? Ah, that's what my brother made in school. It's an orangutan. It's where they keep the scrolls, in the synagogue, from which we read, and it's all out of cardboard, obviously.
Do you think he would have been an architect or an engineer?
I don't know. I don't know, but he was quite good in art by the look of it, or whatever. He was very quiet. My sister and I were the noisy ones. He was quite studious, and maybe because he was the middle one, although he was the only boy. I think he was most like our father, He was, quiet, did his own thing, good boy in school, good boy in the synagogue, and that sort of thing. Ah, there's my brother, Carl. We named children after the parents, so Simon is his Hebrew name. That's why he's Simon Charles instead of Carl. In October 38, my brother was actually, you don't know what a bar mitzvah is when the children are 30. He was the last bar mitzvah in the big Frankfurt shul. And I actually have a document that one of my grandsons, Adam, got from America, where they sing and they learn something, where the teacher had written the name and date of the bar mitzvah and the name of the parents of every child that he taught. And I've got that from the very early 30s until 1938, where my brother's the last one on that list. I remember it was a huge shul, and we were not very important people. But I remember you have honors in the shul, and somebody opens the ark. And I remember on one festival, my father stood up on top and opened the ark, and that was a real honor. Other than that, I remember on fast days, my mother was a very bad faster, and so my father used to take us home to have something, the children to have something to eat. Whereas in Cardiff, the children brought sandwiches and had them in the hall outside. But that sort of thing sticks in my mind. What I remember very vividly, we had some very smart great aunts probably, and they used to come on a Wednesday afternoon and play bridge with my grandmother, and we weren't then allowed to go into the drawing room. I remember that. And I actually brought with, in my trunk when I came, prayer books with their golden names written on top, because we obviously had them in the house from them. It was quiet and uneventful. I had two aunts. My father's sister lived in a place called Bad Kissingen, so sometimes we went there. I think once I stayed, and then I became very homesick, so then we just went there if I went with one of my siblings. And my mother had a sister who lived in Bad Homburg, which I can show you the pictures here. And we used to go there, and that was a big treat because they were a couple without children. I can't remember what his work was, but it always seemed very lush and sophisticated, and child-free and very clean and very, very, very spruce. My mother had another sister who lived in Milan with her husband. He was an architect, and she was an interior designer, and they fled from there in 1938 to Lima, Peru. And I'm still in touch with their grandson, who in fact met up with them in Israel a couple of months ago. The ones in Bad Homburg, they went to America, she and Henny, Auntie Henny, and Uncle Kurt. And the big treat was, during the war, the American aunt used to send me, I've got pictures of me, clothes and tights. I gather I've heard since that all the American relations did that. So it was always a great, great thrill to have a new sweater or a new, I think once I had a two-piece. There were definitely pictures around of Auntie Henny's parcels. It was, a great, great thrill. Ah, there we are. Now there I am in Merthyr, and the outfit is what Auntie Henny sent from New York. I remember a Kristallnacht you've heard of.
Yes.
The sitting. By then, by 1938, my grandfather had died, and my grandmother lived with us, and I remember sitting with her in the front room, and although the synagogue was a fair way away from our house, I could see the flames burning. But 10-year-old, you know, I didn't connect. I wasn't frightened, except I was afterwards frightened when they said, there are people watching the house, it's SS, you have to be very quiet, we won't put all the lights on. I remember that sort of thing. And the fear creeping up when my father was taken to concentration camp. I remember those things. School I don't remember, oddly enough. One thing I do remember, it's just come back to me, when they went into Poland, a lot of Polish Jewish children came into my school. I do remember that. And I actually remember derogatory remarks that we made about these children saying "Die Polacken," age 10. The original racist in the child. I don't remember any terrible fear, although already all the heads of departments, professors, all the Jewish ones had already been dismissed. And really, I didn't read the paper. As I say, I wasn't a very switched on a 10-year-old. Didn't know anything, you know, what Hitler was about to do or what he'd been doing. And I just felt that these were very nasty people and they really want to get us. I must have had an understanding in that they were targeting the synagogues. And I think there was a vague memory that a lot of people had already left Germany, people we knew, because they felt that the anti-Semitism was, really hadn't peaked yet, but it was going to peak. And then that Kristallnacht was the beginning of the end. I found it a bit frightening, but not as frightening as I now think back on it as an adult. I remember very vividly them coming on a Friday night for my father to go to concentration camp, and they were allowed to take a small suitcase with, and we were very orthodox, and you weren't supposed to carry, and there was a debate, should he, shouldn't he, and he did take a suitcase with. And I remember 4 weeks later him coming home, and he hadn't taken his boots off and bathing his feet. The story was that he had the Iron Cross in the First World War. I don't know whether everybody was released or whether they then stayed in the camps. I've got no idea, but I remember 4 weeks to the night of Friday night, he came back. It wasn't like today, you know, if somebody's in prison, you go into the ins and outs of things. He was there, and I don't think there was any question of doing anything about it, because you would have needed non-Jews to instigate any activity, but there wouldn't have been a non-Jew in touch with the Jews by that time. What changed next was that in May 1939, my sister came to England at age 16, guaranteed by people who used her as a skivvy, but she had very, very good friends from Germany, so they looked after her, so she was okay. And then the next thing I remember is being on the train station, out in Frankfurt, my parents seeing me off. And we were not a hugely hugging family, and they kissed me. And I thought, oh, a bit odd, why are they kissing me? I'm going on a trip. And the funny thing is, I picture that, I remember it very vividly, I can see both of them there. I don't remember the train journey to the boat, or the boat to Liverpool, ending up Liverpool Street Station. And then I remember being met by my sister and a married daughter and her husband of the people who had guaranteed for me, because it was in London and I was going to Cardiff. That's very, very clear. But the interim is completely black, which is quite interesting. It can't be trauma, because I don't think I realized that it took a long time for me to realize I wasn't going to see them again ever. And it took a long time. All right, I knew about the concentration camp, but I knew that my father had come back. So I didn't know at all what was going on. I was really incredibly naive. And I don't know, I think it's completely and utterly wiped out. And all the organisation and all that I have no idea about. Because they didn't want to worry me during the whole process and all that sort of thing. My brother also had a place to go to a Jewish type of college in Gateshead, which didn't come through in time. So it was one of these things.
Mm-hmm. Is that a moment that you wonder about when you think back?
No, I don't. I must say I've got completely at peace with, with the whole thing now, and I'm just looking at what we've got and what's coming, and I'm very fortunate. I think the resilience probably started in a very little way when I came to England as a result of my first 10 years, which were, very, very solid and loving. I might have been more resilient if I hadn't started with that and then dropped down a little bit to people who didn't understand me and I didn't understand them, but that was for a very short time. I came with a huge trunk, and in the trunk I brought Hebrew books, prayer books and things, and also some silver soup ladles, which I think, in retrospect, they probably thought was a nice gift for the people I was going to. But I think Miriam's got one now. They're very old and very bent. And all they gave me, now I think of it, it's remarkable, is this. That's all I came with. And these I've had copied. I've thought since, what would you give? Well, the Hebrew books I understand, I suppose they thought in a few years' time I will need them. They didn't know what the future was going to be. And this I understand, they must have felt, look at the size of it. It's a good thing that the technology today can bring these things up. I think that's quite remarkable. What would one give? I've tried to think lately. That is, first of all, we didn't have a lot of photographs. We didn't take a lot of photographs. There's one I can show you in an album of my, oh gosh, that's the rain. Yeah. Unbelievable. Oh my goodness. Of my brother and me at the Taunus, some mountain range and outing. Oh, and there's one very nice one of the three of us sitting in the garden in Bad Homburg of Auntie Henny's house. But a very, very few photographs. I have got some old ones which I'll show you in a little album, calling it Early Days. But I don't know what would one. I think that's a brilliant thing to give. We should never ever any of us be in a situation, God forbid, but that shows a lot of foresight and a lot of feeling the importance of family. Where do you come from? And the longer I live, the more I think that where you come from is pretty important. My mother she was the oldest of the just three sisters. I think they were quite spoilt when they were brought up. The father was at the Diamond Bursa, that's like the Diamond Stock Exchange, that's Grandpa. And his wife, my grandmother, actually, when I show you pictures, her family were, do you know what matzah is? Matzah bakers. So there's a picture of the matzah bakers in a place called Gelnhausen, which I'd never heard of. Oh, and my mother was, she taught French and English. Lina Schwabacher, that was her name. Raisi Wallerstein, 6th of August 1916. So that was her in school. That one, standing behind. But my father had no idea, and I remember very vividly someone coming to the house, and he'd been learning English, and he said, "Oh, already?" And when they left, he said, "Oh, at last." He just got the... And we children thought it was very funny. I didn't even know the meaning of the words, but everybody had a good laugh at his expense. My father was a businessman. He was an orphan by the time he got married. Both parents had died. Now, must have been quite an age. I've got the dates here. He wasn't a young man. And very, very kind, very gentle. I'm sure he never asked anybody for anything. We have, you know, Yom Kippur is the big fast.
Yes.
And when I came here, I was a little girl and I should have kept the letter. Somebody who used to work with him wrote me a letter, and one of the things he told me about him was that the night before the big fast, when we're supposed to confess all our sins, he would go along the promenade in Frankfurt to see if he met anybody whom he might just have upset in the previous year. That's the sort of person he was. And all my is from him, I'm afraid. He was just kind and humble and a very good person. And to this day, Alan asked me some time ago when we went, do you know Yad Vashem? It's a place where they have all the Holocaust memorabilia and all that. So there was an evening, and when we came back, he said, "Well, what do you think?" and all that, and how much you think of your parents. And there are times when I think, should I do this or should I do that? And I think, what would my father have done? And I always feel it's the right thing, probably the soft thing. But there we are. But he was just a very good person. What has caused me to live the way I live? I think genetic part. You think of other people and only treat them the way you feel you'd like to be treated. I can't bear to see anybody needing anything and I'm not able to help them or anything like that. I can't make big enough the experience I had when I came, and people were very kind. But a bit of it is that, do you know what a shmoo is? I'm a bit of a shmoo. And in order to ingratiate myself with people when I was younger, I would flow over with, "What can I do for you? Let me lie down when you walk on top of me," you know. And that's become second nature. But I really think it could be that from the age of 10 until for quite a few years, and I may have to thank that period, I couldn't go to the fridge and take a fruit without asking. And I was entirely dependent on them other than my American clothes. And the people I went to bought me clothes and were very, very kind. And therefore, I was always careful not to upset the apple cart and to be very, very polite and very helpful. And I think that I must have internalized a lot of that. I'm only thinking of that now that you've actually mentioned it. And I think those are the components of me today. This is when I first got to Merthyr. It must have been maybe the end of 1939 with the two nephews of the people I came to, and they had a very large house and the dog at the time. Never been in the presence of a dog before. The Cardiff ones guaranteed for me to come to this country, and to take a child of 10, you know they're going to need shoes and clothes and feeding. It's a big responsibility, so that was a big thing. But on September the 3rd, 1939, war broke out, and enemy aliens, including 10-year-old children, were not allowed to be in Cardiff, which was a seaport, and they were worried about spying. So they had to send me somewhere. They had these, at that time, 2 brothers and 1 sister-in-law in Merthyr, so where better than to go there? And it was going to be for a short while, presumably, but then I stayed there. And I remember the lady of the house, Auntie Annie, saying, it's good you're with us, because Uncle Alter, that's the old uncle in Cardiff, wouldn't have been able to really look after you and buy you nice clothes and things. So that's how I came to be in Merthyr, because, but it was the ones who had very little money who actually guaranteed for me. They were an interesting family. The couple had married, I think, when they were 19 and 20, a great love affair. Their own family, there were 4 daughters and 4 sons. And this one, who was the youngest, was a golden soul. You know, he really was. So much so that I hadn't been there very long, and for a man of 40, they'd had no children. They had not been able to have any children. He'd taken me out to buy me shoes. Imagine a man of about 40 taking out a little girl. Okay, by then I'd been with them a little while, but it shows the sort of, he really was sweetness personified. And at the age of 40, he died, which was a calamity for his young widow. Living with them had been a single brother who'd never got married. They somehow managed to get permission from a big rabbi to get married. So she then married his brother, and we still lived in the same house. Within a very short time, the man who became the second husband had learned to read Hebrew, to sing part of the service and loved it, and it had made a whole new, they just took it on and loved it. They'd not been brought up to it, although when they were young possibly, but nothing for years, and it made a lot of difference to them. I mean, I didn't do anything to them. All they used to do, they used to put me on a chair and make me sing, "Wish me luck as you wave me goodbye." I remember that very vividly. Must have been the first song I learned, and I didn't know how to pronounce the W. In a way, I was quite spoiled, because I was in a house where they were well-to-do people. It was a very nice house. They encouraged me. I had no notion of studying anything, and I had no notion of studying medicine. But I think from the time I was 13, we used to go past the university, and they used to say, "That's where you're going to go, and you're going to become a doctor." And I had no clue. I came in September to Merthyr, and I went immediately to a little school about a 10-minute walk away called Toynbrodin. I never learned Welsh, incidentally. And then in January I had to take there used to be, yes, I don't think they have it now, an 11 plus to get to a high school. I used to cycle there until I had a bad fall on the bike, and the bike broke, and I didn't break anything, but I cut myself a lot. So I then walked. It was a fair walk. If there was a 2-day festival, I was very anxious to write up what they'd had. So immediately afterwards, one of the people I was staying with would take me to the house of the child, bring back the home so that I could copy out. You didn't have a laptop, nothing. I mean, my grandchildren, Avital and Sarah, I think it's very funny. They've got it all in any, no problem. Copy it up and take it back that evening to those children. I remember always being very anxious to keep up. I was probably quite ambitious. I knew the people I was staying with ambitious, and being me, I didn't want to disappoint them. So I copied it up to everything and tried to learn it all. I remember very little children in that school. They must have thought it quite odd, because although I was speaking English, I must have been speaking not yet with a Welsh accent, but with a very heavy continental accent. And I don't suppose there wasn't another Jewish child in the school as far as I knew. I was very lucky in Merthyr, where I was from 10 until I got married at 22, they were very kind. And the Welsh people, they're often referred to as the people of the book, like with the Bible. And I felt that there's quite a kinship between the Jewish people and the Welsh people. And a lot of them go to various churches and Baptists, and they were extremely kind, except, I have to say, for one Jewish teacher in my secondary school who was an art teacher, and I think she was so anti-Semitic. She was down on me. I was not a good drawer, I do admit, but she was the only person who didn't treat me well, and I remember it so vividly. She was just horrible. And it's funny, she was the only Jewish teacher I ever came across. She obviously didn't like Jews and probably didn't like being Jewish. I mean, who can blame her, you know?
Do you like being Jewish?
I like being Jewish. Although I have to say, I have come across a lot of non-Jewish people, whether they're Christians, practicing Christians or Catholics or whatever, who are very, very good people. We don't have the monopoly, believe me, of being kind and decent people. I have a friend who's no longer alive, but she always used to say the Jewish people did not respond as much they ought to have done. She used to say that there would have been more children saved if only more people had come forward to guarantee. It's difficult to know whether that is so. And I've heard it say that a lot of children, I think probably not a lot, but quite a few, were placed in non-Jewish homes, and if they were very small, they wouldn't have known the difference and would have been brought up in the Christian faith.
Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if you had not been born Jewish?
No, it's completely inbred.
You mentioned your sister.
Yes.
And you got to reconnect with her as soon as you got off the train. Tell me about that moment and getting to see her again.
It was a great relief, because I didn't know the couple who came, who were very kind, who were the daughter and son-in-law of the people I was going to. And therefore this was lovely. And she used to come for certain festivals to spend with me in Cardiff, in Merthyr. I don't know whether you know Passover, the first 2 nights are special. It's Seder night, when we relive the going down and coming out of Egypt. And it's a festival, and we can't travel on a festival. However, the people I was with in Merthyr, who were very kind and got a lot more religious very quickly after I got there, they had relatives in Cardiff. So for the Seder night, this special night, we went to Cardiff, and at the end of the Seder, we travelled home. Now, I wasn't affected that badly. I felt bad because my sister, who was by now 17 or 18, must have been so traumatized. But a funny story is that on the way home, the car somehow injured a sheep. And the sheep, I remember this, the sheep jumped up into the air, and the person I was with, who had no idea about anything Jewish, used to have a prayer book upside down, said, "Oh, look, the Paschal Lamb," because we... Well, the things that you remember. The other traumatic experience I remember is we have a festival when actually all the children dress up. One has to hear the book that is read about those times. And one year there was snow up to the front door, I remember, like this, in Merthyr, and I couldn't go to the synagogue. And I remember that was like the end of that was, it was like eating and sleeping, you know, this is who I was, and there we are.
Did you feel that way for yourself, or do you think you were trying to please your parents from afar, or trying to please God? Why did you feel that way?
I think about God a lot, talk to him a lot. I think, no, I think it was just, it was so much part of me, and I think it was reliving and doing things that they would have wanted me to do. It was just, it was very strong, and it still is. I still feel I have to. The only way I can honour them and their memory is to live and behave like they would have wanted me to. The funny thing is, I used to wonder, maybe when I was 12 or 13, and I still thought I'd see my parents, how would that be? Until the age of 10, I didn't have any foresight whatsoever, just lived in the day. And after that, I just really, for many years, felt, well, I'm going to see my parents again anyway. This is just an interim period.
Mama, did you and Auntie Trudy ever talk about what you thought was happening?
Not at a time when I thought, I would think she must have known we weren't going to see them again. I think I wasn't a very sophisticated or very switched on 10-year-old. Well, they must have had a radio, but I didn't hear any news. I didn't see a newspaper, and therefore for many years I was, in the mind, I would see my parents again. I didn't have depressions or any sort of illness, except when I actually arrived from Germany for the first few weeks, and I was actually with other people who'd guaranteed for me. And every night, and I remember this very vividly because I'm the person I will tell you about in whose room I slept. She was a young unmarried, 20s unmarried lady. I used to complain to her that I had stomachache, and that's why I was crying. So I covered over the fact that I was really crying because I wasn't in my own home. I don't think I can put a date or a year to it, but it must have been quite a few years in when presumably I was getting a little bit stronger in myself anyway, but I felt, well, there's now, look, I'm not going to see them again. You know, if you come across something and it's very gradual, I think it dilutes it all the way. Subsequently, when you see pictures and read about what was happening, read the histories of many of the Jews who were killed in the camps, it was then that I felt terrible. And then a few years ago, when I got this, that took away that feeling at least. What actually happened, which gave me some solace not long ago, the husband of my niece with the 9 children is very organized and businesslike, and he found out that they were shot at Kovno, and I've got a Jewish and an English date when they were shot, and another relative with his synagogue members went there to say the memorial prayer. All until I had that, which is now, I think, 3 years ago, I used to think they'd been in the camp, and that used to bother, used to be a nasty thing that would hit me in the middle of the night. But it looks, which is very odd, that they were taken from Frankfurt, from our house, and shot. I was relieved. I was really relieved, because in my darker moments I thought my mother was like me, hated the cold. And when I used to see pictures, it was just, not that I could do anything about it, but there was relief when the nephew found all these details about them. And I say I think about them, but not that much, but I do. When I have something that I really can't make up my mind, I think about what would my father have done. I don't have sad thoughts about them because at least now they're not suffering.
How do you think your grieving process has changed throughout your life?
I think that, well, when I thought I was seeing them again, I was only grieving that because I was with strange people. I was missing them. But when I eventually came to the realization that I wouldn't, a good few years had passed, and I didn't have a breakdown or anything. I tell you what I used to do in order to recreate the atmosphere around myself. We sing certain Hebrew songs on Friday night and Sabbath after the meal, and I used to sit on my own and sing those to myself, and that gave me a lot of solace. I was almost building a wall around myself. But I wasn't unhappy for long. I'm sure of that, because people were very good to me, and they bought me clothes, and Auntie Henny sent me clothes from America. You know, a child, 11, 12. I think that children probably are very adaptable. I don't know why, but I was quite adamant I didn't want to be adopted. But when I was older, they wanted to adopt me, and I wanted to keep my family name, because I suppose I felt it was something that's the only thing I had of value. It was my name. Rosenthal means roses in the valley.
What a nice name. So thinking about when you got married, was it hard to give up that name?
No, not at all. No problem. And Cohen, you can't have a better name. What I think is really admirable, I could have stayed there and been a house, all my life. And it was they, and purely they, who not encouraged and pushed me to study. And they knew once I studied, anyway, I was away all day for 6 years. And I think that is something really to their own detriment, and where they could have cashed in and have had years of benefit. Because I used to think to myself, I could have been quite a good housekeeper, I think. Don't know what, I can't change duvet covers. They're a terrible nuisance they are. You probably know how to do it, do you?
Not well.
I can't bear it. But I think that's really something that I still to this day admire them for.
How did you feel about going to medical school?
Oh, I was quite excited. I wanted to be a doctor. There was a lot of camaraderie, a lot of very nice girls. It was student life is very nice. The studying was okay. It was just that the exams were quite nerve-wracking. I got married when I was in my fifth. I still had 1 year to go. My husband was, although he had no clue about medicine, he would just open my book. And I remember they were going to a family wedding. He said, sorry, you got your exam tomorrow. I was like a child, and you can't come. And he would indicate the pages I had to do by the time he and his late mother came home. And for somebody who had no clue what was going on, and would then test me. I also have to say that in Merthyr, the lady who was looking after me and who had, left school at 15 or something, she used to test me, and funnily enough, in things like chemistry and quite a few of the subjects, the things she tested me on always came up. It was very funny, but I'm always very nervous for exams, very, very nervous. I suppose the height of my achievement was catching Papa and getting married at that time, because I also felt very safe with him. I didn't, in my previous, 10 years before, I was having to be, my best behavior. You're not at home, so you can't really let your hair down. But here there was somebody who I knew loved me enough to put up any crazy ideas I might have or any crazy behavior I must show.
How did it feel to fall in love?
Oh, amazing. I was crazy about Papa. One of the first times I saw him was we have a festival, Simchas Torah, when all the young people get together. And that's when I saw him. And I thought, oh, he's very nice.
What was your first conversation with him?
That I can't remember. I was probably petrified. First of all, he had a lot of charm, a lot of chain. I thought he was very good looking. When I saw him, I thought he's definitely the one. He was still studying at the time, and I was still living in Merthyr. So at 5:30 in the morning, with curlers still in my hair and a scarf over it, I used to catch a train in order to come to a relation of the Merthyr people, put my things down so that I would know which bus Papa was going on to his university, and then be at the bus stop just round the corner when he was on the bus. I mean, I had to get some grips on him somehow. Soon we invited him to come to Merthyr for tea, so that was a big thing. So I remember the lady was looking after me saying, we've got to make some nice cakes, he's coming. Then we were very lucky. Neither of us had any money, but I lived in Merthyr and he lived in Cardiff, and we made friends with one of the operators on the phone. And she used to allow us, he from Cardiff, me from Merthyr, she used to allow us to have long conversations without docking them, because we didn't want to have, he didn't want his father to have a huge bill. I didn't certainly want to have my people to have a bill. So we used to talk for a long, long time every day. But that was our only way of communicating. I was just crazy about him, and I was lucky it was reciprocated. We used to go and take a picnic onto a mountain near Cardiff, and on the way on the bus going back, he said, "Will you marry me?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, well, there you are, proposal on the bus, so though we're okay."
And rather fitting that you got engaged on the bus after you followed him around on the bus in those early days.
I can remember now sitting two of us on a bus, and when he'd asked me, and he said, well, that was a proposal on the bus. He must have thought to himself, am I mad? But today, and remember, we're now talking, this was 1950, I mean, I don't know whether you know, but some of them have such elaborate proposals. He had no money, he was studying, he did a Hebrew degree, and then he did a law degree, and then he did Law Society finals. And I remember Christmas time, he used to work for the post office delivering, and he bought himself a college scarf, and that was very precious because he'd bought that for himself.
What's the most romantic thing your husband ever did for you?
Oh, well, I think even before we were engaged, he bought me a perfume. Not one of the very expensive ones, but it must have been quite expensive for him. Can't remember the name, I can remember the smell, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. That was that. Other than that, he had no imagination, and every time that I had a birthday, he would go with the children to the local store, and mostly it was slippers. And when they brought them home and hidden them always under a bed, I would go and find them. It was always slippers. I don't know how many slippers he thought I needed. He was not really a romantic at all, in a way, but he was very good. Mm-hmm. The wedding was quite a big wedding in Cardiff, and some very good friends who from Frankfurt originally, who now lived in Wales, came to be there, and it was in a large hotel in Cardiff. Quite jolly, nice invitations, which we've still got. It was very respectable, let's put it that way.
Did you have any sad moments that day, thinking about your family?
The people who came, who now, I mean, they're no longer alive, the children live in London actually now, and grandchildren. they gave me away, so to speak. They were the interferers, was the people who give you away, walk you in, whatever. No, I think it's a fair time ago. I was so happy to be settled and to have this lovely husband. I don't think that I had any sadness at that time. And also the years had gone, and the time, they say it and it's true, time is a great healer. There's no question.
What were your happiest moments from that day?
I suppose that I got him. Irrevocably, you know, that the deed was done. And the best thing I ever did, believe me. He was somebody, because not all young men would be so sympathetic, and you know, you think, well, a young girl, let her get on with it. But he was very, very good, very good. His wife and children. David used the phrase for the stone setting of my husband, Laura Sholem. Dad did a master stroke to marry me. Well, I regard it as my master stroke too, because he then so looked after me in that whenever there was anything on the television about the camps or the Holocaust or Schindler's List, I never saw. That was no question. The children knew if I was in the house, they were not going to watch it. He really looked after me as if I was a baby and he was the mother or father. He was very, very considerate, always aware of my background and who I was, and very careful not to say, you know, the wrong thing. He could be very businesslike. I think he was quite a hard negotiator and all that sort of thing, but he really looked after me like a baby.
I want to talk a little bit about your marriage. What do you think made your marriage a strong marriage?
I think that just loving each other very much. My husband hadn't had it very easy. His own mother died when he was 6, and he was left in charge of an elderly father who subsequently married again. And the stepmother was certainly not a bad stepmother, but she wasn't his mother. I think he had a hard life as a young child, losing a mother at such a young age. And I think that to go into a marriage where he would have his own setup and he would be able to influence the mood of that marriage, so to speak, he was very much into feeling we just have to make each other, we must make each other happy, and that was the be all and end all really, and save if there was any sadness lurking or any problem, it was going to be dealt with, and we're going to have a happy life, enjoy and appreciate what we've now got.
Tell me about the early days of your marriage and the honeymoon period that you had. It seems like you were very smitten with him.
Very, very smitten with him. We lived at the time with his stepmother because she had gone into the house with his late father. It wasn't brilliant. She was a very nice lady, but she was an older lady and I was quite a young girl and completely inexperienced. But it was very happy. I used to wonder at the time I could have behaved better and I could have maybe brought her in, included her more in our activities. It must have been quite difficult living in a house, which was her house, and having this young couple coming in and out and enjoying themselves and laughing and giggling. I could have been quite wrapped up in myself and my new husband and the new baby, thinking, I'm a cat's whiskers, which is pretty alien to me generally.
What were things that you and your husband always agreed on?
I think how to deal with the children.
What were things you always disagreed on?
Who to invite.
What do you miss most about him?
I just miss having a lovely person around. I just miss him. I can't put it into one thing, just his person.
Mm-hmm. What did you love most about him?
Well, I was attracted to his looks, I have to be quite honest. And then I can probably say what Gideon said about what made him choose Raimi. We could talk to each other about anything.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything you didn't like about him?
I can't really think of anything. We didn't have any arguments because we were at IDEM anyway, and if there was something that I might not have thought of or suggested or had 1% doubt about it, I would throw the doubt out and say, yes, darling. Because I think, to have peace and a good relationship in the marriage, it's no good starting bickering on little things at all. And I think, and it's much easier, obviously, to have a happy, safe home. You get older, you get more settled. Tremendous joy when the kids are born. I was very excited, and what would it be, especially the first one? You wonder, what's it going to be and what's it going to look like? And do you find that?
I find the craziest part of the whole thing is when they come out and you see them and they're like, that's what you look like. You just have no idea.
I know. No, it's quite an incredible experience. Before Barbara had Gideon, I said, I don't know what you're worried about. And I kept saying it's like falling off a log. And we were in the next room and Gideon was born and I was called into the room to see him. And she said, that was some falling off a log. She wasn't pleased at all with my introduction to labour. But it is like falling off a log, isn't it? I mean, it depends on how the log is, how.
What were some of the first things you noticed about David as a baby?
Oh, I tell you what, he was born on the 15th of December. I was in hospital for 15 days, which was then. I came home on Christmas Day and he had a sticky eye and I was petrified. And I think the phone wasn't working.
If you had to describe David in 3 words, what would they be?
He's bright, he's got a very good work ethic, and I think he's a good straight person. Mm-hmm. Good to have a lawyer like that. Yes. David used to come, I always used to say that's why I've stopped working, because I want to be home when he gets home from school. He used to come home through the back door saying, I've got 20 out of 20. Like the 3 of them, he's a very good child. He phones in the morning, how are you, what could I do for you? And anything that he thinks I'm finding a little bit out of the ordinary, he says, okay, I've done it, I'm doing it. Even things that I might be able to do myself. Not like bank transfers and things, I have no idea, so I just pass my bills to him. He's a very good chap.
What's it like seeing him as a grandfather? I'm
amazed. I am really amazed and overjoyed how This has brought out a completely human quality. He's besotted with them. Mm-hmm. He's always telling me what she said and what she does. And the little cousin also, this and that. He's actually changed as a person. The main thing is, I mean, he's very lucky. I think he found the right, that goes for all of them, he found the right partner.
Let's talk about Judith. What were the first things you noticed about her when she was a baby?
Well, the poor thing slept in the bathroom we were in a very little house. She was always pretty lively and very friendly and real little girl. They were neither of them at all difficult children. She's quite extrovert. She goes into great detail. I think she's much more meticulous than I am with a lot of things. She's very focused, and I think that she is the perfect partner for Alan, who is very, very, very clever, but can't put his foot down, to put it in simple terms, and Judith can both feet down. So they're a brilliant pair.
Tell me about Simon.
Simon was always called the Kleiner, which means the little one. He's the big one now. He was very, very timid. You wouldn't believe if you now spent an hour with him. He's completely different. I don't know when it happened. His own children say, my daddy is a clown. He's very friendly and a very good chap. He did biology and that sort of thing for A-level and was hoping to do dentistry, but then somehow got mislaid, and I don't know quite how it happened, and decided to study law. His father was a lawyer, David was a lawyer, and somehow that was the obvious thing. Gosh, it's a subject to study. I mean, so dry. Used to go out with a few girls, but nothing ever came of it. And then eventually got together with Sharon, somebody suggested it, and they've just been right for each other, thank God. So, and he also very good. The three of them are incredibly caring. I mean, Judith phones 4 times a day from Israel, and both Simon and David phone and come in, and anything I need and everything. And Sharon and Barbara. I mean, I'm very lucky. Of your own children, you expect to be good, but for the children-in-law, they are amazing. And the others who are amazing, most of whom phone on Friday, which is quite a nuisance because the Sabbath comes in very early. Having seen them all grow up, I'm incredibly lucky. They're all very, very good people. The children, the grandchildren, the spouses, they're all very good. They phone, they FaceTime, I'm not sure that I would be doing all that if I had an old lady sitting somewhere. They don't cease to amaze me.
Can you tell us a little bit about Auntie Trudy and what kind of woman she was?
She was amazing. She really was. Where's the little picture? There she is. She was amazing. She had after she came, and she came in the May of 39, she had a very hard life. I was spoiled, whereas she worked ever since she came from the age of 16 in a house with not pleasant people. But she had a lot of German friends, and because of that, I've got a Welsh accent, she and all her friends, until they died, had a German accent, because they were, but I'd forgotten more or less all my German. I just a bit of broken German. Her best friend, she was best friends with somebody in school who's now no longer alive. They were about 3, and my sister said to this friend of hers, whose daughter visited me last night actually, will you be my friend? And the other one said, I have to think about it. It's funny, these little girls with these old heads. We used to write to each other from Merthyr to Merthyr to London. She eventually married a very, very nice man. She was much more orthodox than me. She covered her hair. Can you see the scheitel there? You probably can. Yes?
Yeah.
A good scheitel spotter. I wanted to wear scheitel when we, shall we stick with the Trude for the moment. She didn't have any qualifications for proper teaching, but worked in the Jewish nursery schools and that sort of thing. Soon after they got married, they were house parents in a home in Clonin Castle in Ireland for children brought over by one of the rabbis from the camps. So I went to visit there. Life, I think, was quite difficult. She had 7 children, but I have to say to you that her oldest daughter had 9, and each of those 9 now have got anything from at least 7 to 13. So David, my oldest son, used to say when he can't get to sleep, instead of counting sheep, he tries to count second cousins, but he never gets there. I mean, it's all very orthodox, but very kind and very good, and very keen on limited amount of money. I remember we were sitting there putting nail polish on, colourless, you understand. She always tried to look very nice, had beautiful things from the charity shop. I just cut out, there was a picture of the Queen, Camilla, in a charity shop. And it looks as if she's bought something there, but she was just visiting. The student said, you realise she's just visiting the charity shop. But Trude always looked very nice and very modest. And once I remember giving her, I can't remember whether it was a blouse or a dress, which was actually from Marks and Spencer's, but I had one dress ever from Harrods for my engagement. So I cut out the Harrods label and put it into the thing I gave her. She was very happy. She wasn't a snob. She was just goodness personified. I mean, she had all my father's kind genes. I mean, she was quite amazing. Very, very kind, and she would be visiting old ladies and would never speak ill of people. I'm working on that.
How do you see your family members in your new family members? When you think back to your parents and your brother and your sister and yourself even, how do you see them in the family that you've created?
I'm very happy that on the whole, they're all following in those footsteps. And unfortunately, I don't know whether I should say this, much of the Jewish community has gone so much the other way, you know, to sit and study and not work, which is completely abhorrent to me, because in Germany and everywhere, and the great rabbis, and they say, get yourself, do some labor so that you can be paid, and study the Torah. But they now sit, and a niece used to say, polishing benches. They're sitting and learning and not doing anything for society, which is a terribly retrograde step. But my own children, grandchildren, and please God, great-grandchildren, are really going on very, I mean, so lucky in the way that I was brought up.
How do you feel about your grandchildren serving in a Jewish army?
I'm very, very proud of them, because we managed to we've got, thank God, Israel. Somebody has to protect it, and if our children, our sons don't, as we know, thousands don't go into the army, which I think is horrendous. I'm very, very proud, and just pray that they and all the other boys who go in should be safe.
What do you think?
They're doing an amazing job.
What do you think your father would say after serving in an army that turned on him? What would he say about a Jewish army and having the privilege of great-grandsons?
He would think it's what he's ever dreamt of. He would just say, you know, it would be, it's amazing when you think about it. It's absolutely amazing, and making it all the more terrible that there are large sections who don't go into the army.
How did you get involved with the Committee for Racial Equality or Racial Justice?
Somebody local may have suggested me, and Mark Bonham Carter, his sister's an actress, I think she lives near Simon, came down to visit me and had a long chat. I remember him saying, I don't know why he even said, he said, it's not like learning the Talmud, you just have to read a little bit and to get to know the problem. And that was really, really interesting. People used to say, you can't change what's in your heart and your mind by a law, but that's not so. Because if there's a law which says you have to have 10% of workers from a different race, different colour, different country, and you work with them, and you actually see they're exactly like, they're very nice people. So it does change people's attitude. There are still a lot of problems, but at that time I did feel that the law had helped, and we had a very nice an Indian who used to, through Ramadan, I remember, because we used to have late afternoon and early evening meetings, and I always used to go at 6:45 because he was going home to have a meal. But very nice people, and I went to a few, actually, I think at least 2 weekends in one of the Oxford colleges. Terrible rooms there for the students. We had various speakers, but it was very interesting. I was also on a noise advisory committee. That wasn't so interesting. I just learned that lorry drivers and people who go to discos more than once, I don't know, a week or a month, have hearing loss, quite frankly. You don't go to discos every night.
Certainly
No.
not.
Only every other night.
Every other night.
How did it feel for you to become an MBE?
I tell you exactly. First of all, we had a letter to go to the Royal Garden Party. Papa was not that well, and I decided we're not going to that, okay? And then the letter came, and I think the children were very thrilled. I don't know, I was already very, much my thought was going, looking after Papa and how he was. I mean, he, as you can see from the picture, he was there. I suppose it was a bit of a thrill to go to Buckingham Palace. The Queen was actually away, out of the country, and it was Anne, who was very nice. Where do I live? What did I do? And all that sort of thing. And the palace was very nice, but it wasn't, and it isn't such a big deal, you know.
What does it mean for you as someone who came here as a refugee to be acknowledged by England as someone who's contributed so much?
I think from that point of view, having come at 10 and mixed with locals, whether Welsh or English, I didn't consider myself really that I hadn't been born here almost. Because remember, when you're 10 and you get the language and you forget German more or less, it's different. My sister was in London, where there were a lot of people of her age and older, and they had come when they were, say, in their late teens, and with their parents who were obviously older. They were still a little bit in the German culture, and they spoke German amongst themselves. But I didn't. I spoke English, and I felt as English or Welsh as the rest of my friends. It didn't really occur to me.
Why were you so drawn to that work with equality?
Well, I think it's probably the Jewish attitude, isn't it? I mean, really, everybody is made in the image of God, not just various groups, and it's a completely natural thought to me. I mean, I can't understand why people should think otherwise.
I can't either. Is there anything else that you can't understand that you've been trying to wrap your head around?
There's a lot of things I can't understand. I don't think I can. Nothing. I sometimes can't understand how people behave, if they really behave badly and selfishly. I can't understand why young people should get terrible illnesses which can't be cured today. I probably cannot understand more things than I understand. I think the only thing I know for sure is to behave to other people like you yourself would like to be dealt with. That's the only certainty.
How do you feel about Germany and Germans today?
Unlike people who won't have a German machine, why should I cut off my nose and spite my face? Is that what's the saying? Spite my face or something, yes. Number one, I don't think of them. Number two, the Nazis were, children of the devil. My sister and I were invited, like all people like us, to go back. And a friend of mine went back and was taken to the opera and a hotel and all that. Neither of us ever wanted to go back. I remember once, I think on our first trip to Israel, the plane happened to go down in Frankfurt purely for refueling or something, and I felt quite uncomfortable. I wouldn't want to go back. I'm happy to have a Miele washing machine, and I suppose the nicer part of me would feel that today they too are sorry for what their ancestors did, and hopefully nobody else is around who would do that sort of thing again.
What do you think about the state of the world today?
Ghastly. You know, I've just come from Boots. Half the things they don't have now, and they don't know whether they're coming in. Everything is topsy-turvy, but the worst thing is the cruelty going on in Iran and Ukraine and other parts of the world. I think it's very, very bad. Hopefully it can only get better, but it's going to take a long time, and there are a lot of cruel people around.
And you've lived through one of the most cruel and terrible times in history back in the 40s. How does today compare to that time?
I think at that time it was more, in a way, isolated. It was, as far as I was concerned, in one part of the world, and then there was the war between the Allies and the enemy. I think it's worse today.
Do you have any recurring dreams?
Well, one recurring dream, which I may not have had now for perhaps a year, is that I'm going into an exam and I haven't finished the course. And that is very, very real. I was always a last-minute person. Used to have to stay up all night swatting. And Gideon will tell you, smoking and drinking black coffee. I once told him foolishly, it was true. And when I wake up, it's as if somebody's given me $1 million. It's just but it is so real. I qualified in 52, so that's a long time. So I must have been traumatized. Other than that, I have dreams about people who are not alive any longer, which I don't find unpleasant at all. I mean, I find it quite pleasant. I don't dream about my parents or brother or any of that, or the family. I think dreaming about people is much more rare than this examinitis, whatever you like to call it. It's not good.
What's your favorite food in the world?
That's a very, very difficult question. Whenever I go out with the kids, I have spring rolls, which I like very much, but I have them always because I don't make them at home. Other than that, I suppose it would be chocolate almonds or that sort of thing. And also, one of the happiest things about having to put on weight now is I can eat my way through a packet or 5 packets of salt and vinegar crisps.
What's the most amazing invention that you've seen in your lifetime?
Well, I'm inclined to say antibiotics, just having finished the second dose, and what did we do with germs?
How do you try to spend your time every day?
The time goes very well. I often get up quite late. The other day I slept until 9:30. And if the weather is reasonable, like today, I would go out for a walk. I would speak to friends. I would read, listen to the radio. I don't have a television that works, but the radio is on constantly. And cooking and baking quite a lot, which I enjoy. and making calls to some people who are a bit older. I spend quite a lot of time on the phone because I know quite a lot of old people, and yes, one is older than me, but the other is not quite so old, encouraging them to keep moving. I think once you get to an age like this, you've just got to keep walking, but on the whole, people don't accept it. They still don't accept it. I've got a couple of friends now, and I said, right, we're going walking, and I've sold it to them. I think keeping going, brain and legs is good. And thank God that you're I do thank him for that, for keeping me as good as I am, and the good grandchildren.
Is there anything that you do every day, or that you've done every day of your life?
I try to say there's a special prayer. I used to go to a group. He's just been made a sir, Rabbi Mervis. Who gave us out, said, if there's a little Tehillim, I don't know exactly what it means, I'm ashamed to say it every day. And I've had them printed out, and the day isn't right if I haven't said that. My nightly apple, when I can't sleep at night, you haven't, what I must tell you is how I matured to be careful not to open my mouth and say things. I don't know how that comes to the nightly apple. Yes, because sometimes I can't sleep. So in the middle of the night, I come downstairs, I have a cup of tea and an apple and a little read, and I go back to bed and I'm able to sleep. But what has kept me awake is having said something that I shouldn't have said, that might have upset somebody or might have caused somebody to have an argument with somebody. Yes, and that I now think, and as I said before, often I don't say it. Least said, soonest mended. It's really, people say things, and it often leads to no good and bad relationships. And I used to be quite bad like that, just say what comes into my mind. And it was with age. And there's bound to be some good things as one gets older.
How do you feel about your age?
I tell you exactly how I feel about my age. It's very nice to be here. I'm very fortunate, but I wouldn't like to deteriorate a lot. I'm very happy to, exit nicely. I'm sure everybody must want that. Got an excellent reception committee up there, and it'll be fine. I do buy green bananas, so I've obviously got the hope for a little extension.
Tell me about your reception committee. What do you believe happens when you die?
I haven't quite made up my mind yet, but a lot of good people, all I mean is a lot of ancestors are there, forebears. I don't fancy, all the stories about heaven and hell, all sorts of stories. I don't believe in that. I think you just go to sleep and have a very pleasant sleep. I don't think any further. I think it's not healthy to think too much. Use out the little bit of brain that's left. It's not worth it. I'm in the present and grateful and thankful to God. What can one wish for? There's nothing to wish for. I'm very lucky. Judith, my daughter, always says, Mum's last words, her first words and her last words are, I'm very lucky. We are very lucky. And I do try very, very hard to pass that on to the children and the grandchildren. Because if you feel happy, you want to make other people happy. And you can. I sometimes feel, but I talk to myself and I think, what are you mucking about for? It's disgusting. No, really. I think not to appreciate one's good health and good fortune. Amazing partners they've chosen. I mean, a lot of it is luck. It's nothing clever. It just happens. Unfortunately, I've seen it happen, in acquaintances very often, that it doesn't happen. Children are not well, marriages don't go, all sorts of things can go wrong, as we know. And to have them all happily settled and good people, good people. I don't wish anything else for the ones who come after me. I really don't.
What are your tips for living a meaningful and healthy life?
Who is rich? He who is satisfied with his portion. Number one. That's very important. The other one, actually, my husband used to quote always, Nicol Melanda Hiscalti, I learn from all my pupils. I think to be satisfied, I haven't been put to the test because I've been very lucky. I'm sure everybody's got that within themselves, to look at something and say, look, those flowers are beautiful. And somebody will say, yes, and in 3 days' time, although they won't because they've got sugar in the water, they'll be dead. You know, it's an attitude. I think you're born with that genetically, but I'm sure that you could work on it. I've trained myself. Do you know what I've trained? And I can give it as a good tip. Rami, tell me if you disagree. Don't praise one lot of great-grandchildren to another lot of their parents. Do you know, another lot, not their somebody else's parents. What do you think of that?
Maybe there might be a bit of a competitive nature in this family.
No.
No.
Well, I certainly don't have a favourite grandchild. Both the grand and great-grandchildren are really a pleasure to, and a very big source of pride for me. And I haven't had to work on it like I had to on my own children. Parenting has quite a lot of obligations, and quite many times one has to say, no, you can't do that, no, you can't have that. Whereas with grand and great-grandparenting, all that type of discipline and really making sure they grow up to the sort of people we would like them to be, goes by the board, and that's left to the parents. And as a grand and great-grandparent, I don't have obligations, so it's pure pleasure and delight. And they're a constant source of entertainment.
If you were to say to them, to live a good life, focus on
what the Almighty has bestowed on you.
What would you say they shouldn't waste their time on?
Looking at Facebook. The boys in Israel put Facebook on my... I didn't know, and I looked, and all I could see was these people in the Caribbean and here and there, and I thought of the people watching it, thinking, look, here I am in a little hovel, I've hardly got enough to food, and there are people all over the world. Everybody else is living a life like that, so I got them to remove it from my... I don't like Facebook.
What are some things or tips for your great-grandchildren and some of your grandchildren to look for in a partner?
They should look for somebody who's a good human being. I mean, that takes in everything: kind, to look after them, to look after children, to do the right thing in life, just to be a good person. What, if there is a God, what He would want us to be and do.
What are some of your most cherished possessions?
I'm not much into possessions, although God knows how they're going to get rid of all this lot when I go. I think probably the photographs I have, first of all, of my late parents and grandparents, and the photographs now of the children. It's nice to see them all around and even to look at them and think, oh, that's what they were like when they were a lot younger. It's very nice to think back 65 years ago. It gives a sort of a feeling of continuity.
What are your favorite qualities about yourself?
Very good question. I don't know. I'm pretty good-natured, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. What are your least favorite qualities about yourself, or things that you've tried to work on in your life?
Things I've tried to work on, and it's got worse. I'm thinking the other day, I feel everything pressurizes me. The thing I like least is putting anybody out. You know, we're always late. Now, that aggravates me, makes me quite angry. If you know you're always late, make an attempt and be there early. I think there's a saying, punctuality is the politeness of kings, or there's something. I think I can't bear to feel, and I'm upset that you would standing in the street, I don't think it's reasonable. I do try and talk to myself, okay, another few minutes, so nobody will really mind. But I'm quite relaxed in other ways. I'm relaxed here, coming and going, and the kids coming and going. But anything, the to-do list can become quite pressurized. And I have a problem. I find it very, very difficult to ask anybody for anything. And it's a very bad failing, particularly as I'm now very old and the children are young and constantly offering and doing. And Amy phones up, would you like some shopping? Constantly offering. And the problem is that after 10, I was for the beginning, with complete strangers. So I certainly wasn't going to start asking for anything there. And that together with my father's genes, my mother was quite forthcoming, and she was the boss. It's obviously had an effect on me, and I just find it very, very difficult. I'm thrilled and happy when people ask me to do things. You know, it gives me such pleasure, but to ask when I know they want to do things for me is quite a battle still, and I think that I haven't got that much time for it to go. So that's where I'm standing at the moment.
There you go.
Thank you. On the desk, there's an art. It should say there is one early. It's quite a mess. Don't judge me.
Would you say you're messy?
I try not to be. I have become tidier and more fastidious. For instance, I can't even bother when I'm on my own to use the dishwasher because it'll take so long so I put gloves on and I wash it by hand. I've become, I think, a bit more fastidious, I hope.
What aggravates you?
If I come across people who are selfish, I think the worst thing, I remember being asked, I think even before David was born, if you had a fairy godmother to wave a wand when you're having a baby, what virtue would you like them to have? And I thought quite a lot, and I'm surprised that I said the same thing there as I now think 75 years hence is consideration. I think, you know, if you consider other people, you can't be selfish. I have a lot of people come to visit me in Jerusalem, my age, younger, and when I remember telling me all about their children and all that, and when they went, I thought to myself, does she know I've got children and grand and great-grandchildren? I think sometimes people are completely so self-centered that having told everything, which is very nice and interesting mostly, they're not interested in other people. Well, I think in order to have a relationship, it's good to know, and people do like to talk about their brilliant direct great-grandchildren, you know, and Zev saying, wait a minute, was it Zev who was asked, what's a carnivore? I think so. It doesn't bother me, but I find it strange. I think I'm the opposite. I'm probably quite curious, quite, want to know about people. And people do like talking about themselves. Well, look how I've been talking about myself now all morning.
What do you think about all this, at being asked to talk about yourself all morning?
It's a very...
I want the honest answer.
It's a new experience, and I think you're an amazing pair, both of the two of you, really.
Mm-hmm. Do you think people want to hear your stories? Do you think your family wants to hear all these things? Some might, I suppose. We're all interested in what our forebears did. But I don't know about all the gory details. I don't know. Remember, there's so much news items and so many type of apparatus where they're shot at you,
I don't know whether people are that interested now in history, because this is virtually what it is. But they may like to know a little bit. I wonder what Mama was like when she was young, or whatever.
What do you hope people learn from you and from your life?
I think that most people have it in their power to a little bit change the way they think, and to, when things are not so rosy, to somehow focus on something where you've really been lucky and think, you know, all these good things, and if necessary, count up all the good things and put it against the one thing that just happens to be upsetting you, and you'll find that that will be eradicated. I think you look at the bright side of things. But I've been lucky; it hasn't been difficult.
Do you have any regrets?
Regrets that I could have done something about. Well, regrets that my parents died youngish and all that sort of thing. I don't think I have regrets that I should have done such and such, you know, or that. And people often say, "Oh, you qualified and you only worked for a year or two." I don't regret it at all, because the years I stayed at home, when David came in and told me his 20 out of 20, I thought that, you know, that's what I was there for. Now that you ask me, I think I'm very lucky. I don't really have regrets.
Mama, you talked about God, that you talk to God all the time and that you always think about God. And I was just wondering, how did you think about God during that time where you didn't know what happened to your parents? And how do you think about God knowing what happened?
I didn't think about him, what was happening with the parents. I then, for many years, used to talk to him. And I have to tell you that lately, I think probably if he were to state a preference, he would prefer one to do good for other people rather than bother him, because I think he's not responding anyway. I can't understand why, if he is so all-powerful, why he let this happen. I really don't know, and I keep reading Jonathan Sacks and it doesn't give me any answers. I don't know where to place him, but I am very good at forgetting or not thinking of things that I can't find an answer to. And there were times when I thought, well, where was he? But that's gone entirely. I believe in God. I think there is somebody. I don't know how much good it is to talk to him, but I think to myself, I can't lose by a little word with him now and again. It doesn't cost me anything, and who knows? But I think really more than talking to him is all he wants is that we should treat people like they like to be treated themselves. I think that's the bottom line. It doesn't mean at all that I think or have faith in him any less, but maybe as you get older you think, just be a decent person and that's all you can hope for, because I don't know what he is about at all. It's easier just to accept and go along with it, and after 94 years doing that, why not? Who wants to? I don't want to blaze a trail.
If you could ask God any question, what would you ask him?
Let me not wake up one morning. Not yet, but when I deteriorate enough.
Mm-hmm. If you could talk to your parents, what would you say?
Thank you for those 10 years.
want to do a sort of fill in the blank. So, because of my father,
I try to be kind and never to hurt anybody and to help people when I can.
mm-hmm. And then try because of my mother, what?
I've got a little bit of a firm streak with me.
And because of your brother?
I try to be gentle when sometimes I might not be.
And because of your sister?
She taught me to be good in all types of situations and always to make the best of things. And this saying in Hebrew, who is rich, who is satisfied with his portion.
Mm-hmm. And because of your husband?
He was just a very good man, and in a way combined a lot of these qualities.
Mm-hmm. And then because of your children?
Just to enjoy them and to be grateful.
Mm-hmm. And your grandchildren and great-grandchildren?
All the same, to be happy and never to lose sight of the fact that you've got, a wonderful, healthy, well-balanced, nice family with children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, children, everything gives me a tremendous amount of joy and comfort and gratitude.
Given your experience during the Holocaust, you could so easily feel sorry for yourself, and that's not, it seems, how you feel. Instead, you feel very grateful and very lucky. Why is that? Is that something that comes from internal, or it's because of your faith? What is it?
I know I've been very lucky in my later years. I do work on it. I have to admit to you, I work on it, and sometimes when I exaggerate for some of the children and say, we are so lucky. There's no doubt, no question, no question. But sometimes I think to myself, and I talk to myself, and I tell myself, what more can anybody ask for, wish for, pray for? And therefore I have no reason not to be very happy and to hope that all the kids that follow will feel the same, because it's terrible to be miserable.
Do you believe that you choose happiness?
To an extent. You can't be happy if you're downtrodden, if you've got bad relationships, if you don't have enough money to put bread on the table, if you don't have a home, if you're cold. Then you've got to work very hard. I'd never had that. So really, I am lucky. But I think there are some situations where sometimes one might feel, oh, this is not going or something. And I do talk to myself. I talk to him and I talk to myself. And on the whole, I don't have to talk to myself a lot, because I think, having made my decision, I'm going to be happy and I am lucky. After years, you internalize it. Judith, as I say, she makes fun of me. She says, well, first and last words, are we lucky? But it's true. It's true. We are very lucky, and it does behove us to remember it every moment of the day. And that, I think, does... you can either be a bit miserable or you can be very happy.
What are your hopes for your family?
I've been so lucky that I never feel, oh, I wish they would do this or I wish they would do that. I would just like them to continue the amazingly good people they are, in good health, achieving what makes them happy in life.
What is your proudest achievement?
I suppose all of them. which was not, very little due to me, but was at least originates from me.
Do you feel like you are a matriarch?
Not really, but when I think of all the offspring, children, grandchildren, grandchildren-in-law and great-grandchildren, I'm quite amazed myself. I'm very, very grateful. With everybody's help, it's increasing constantly while I'm sitting here doing nothing. That's the amazing thing. And they just come in nice and clean and take a biscuit and go home again. What better can you want?
Mama, you said you don't see yourself as a matriarch.
Not really.
But your family does.
Right.
So why do you think that we all view you as such a strong matriarch?
Well, so I must be a good actress. Because between you and me, what do they say? What you see isn't really what you get. I'm not that strong. A lot of it is resilience is a covering, probably. I think underneath I'm still quite timid. I'm covering up that I can't ask anybody for anything, and I'm always I'm always a little bit concerned to do the right thing and that sort of thing.
You, as much as you pretend you're not the matriarch of our family, you are. And
Come again?
I said, as much as you pretend and you don't
I
like
think
to
that
think
Christian's
of yourself.
American isn't as bad as yours. Did you take did you have elocution lessons?
I'm humble. She used to be on television. She has to have good.
Right.
Bis 120, when everyone is thinking, how can we carry Mama's legacy with us? What do you want to say to your family?
I think every moment of your life to appreciate, everybody can appreciate some things in which they regard themselves as very lucky. I know everybody is different and times change, but I think if you can keep that in mind, and even if you fall and you break something and you think it could have been that much worse, and at all times, and particularly when you might be feeling low or depressed, you've lost your pair of glasses, or you've lost a favorite friend or cousin, try and negate that to a certain extent by being positive and saying, but thank God, look what I have got. And
That's great. Thank you.
thank you, girls.
Thank you very much.
I think we celebrate with a coffee or a tea or a coffee.
Thank you so much for doing this.
A pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been quite an experience. I didn't know I could talk so much. There we are.
Are you excited for people to watch it?
Well, I wouldn't mind. I mean, I might feel quite funny if I watch it.